Have you ever felt a quiet shift inside you, a feeling that something deep within is asking for space, yet you keep moving through your life as if nothing inside you is calling for change? In this audiobook, we explore the gentle art of releasing the emotions, expectations, and memories that quietly shape the way you think, feel, and move through the world. Chapter 1. When the mind holds too much. There are moments in life when we take on more than our heart can carry, not because we choose to, but because life unfolds faster than we can process it. A conversation left unresolved, a disappointment we never expressed, a moment of hurt we tried to ignore. These become small weights that settle inside us without warning. Over time, they combine into a heaviness we never agreed to hold. Most people don't realize they are carrying emotional weight until something small triggers an unexpected reaction. A simple word, a short silence, or a passing thought can reveal how crowded the inner world has become. When your mind is full, clarity fades. When your heart is full, peace feels distant. And when your energy is drained by unprocessed emotions, even simple tasks begin to feel heavier than they should. Letting go starts with honesty. Not the kind of honesty you show to others, but the kind you offer yourself when no one is watching. It is the willingness to admit that you are tired, that you have carried too much, and that your mind deserves room to breathe again. This kind of honesty softens the pressure you place on yourself and creates a gentle opening for healing to enter. We often confuse holding on with being strong. But true strength is knowing when to release what has quietly taken space inside you for too long. Letting go is not losing, it is choosing. It is choosing yourself over the weight that slowly drains your emotional energy and keeps you stuck in patterns that no longer match who you are becoming. When you pause and allow yourself to breathe more slowly, you may notice that the heaviness inside is not permanent. It is simply a sign that parts of you have been unheard. Notice how your chest loosens when you acknowledge your own feelings. Notice how your mind softens when you stop judging every thought that rises. Notice how your heart steadies when you allow it to rest, instead of demand more from it. Letting go is not forgetting the past. It is releasing its grip. It is giving yourself permission to move forward without carrying every old moment like a responsibility. This release creates space for clarity to return, for peace to settle, and for your inner world to find its natural balance again. This first chapter reminds you that healing begins quietly. It begins with awareness, with kindness toward yourself, and with the soft decision to no longer carry what was never meant to stay. When you begin to recognize the weight you've been carrying, a quiet shift takes place inside you. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with sudden clarity. It starts with small moments where your mind pauses and you notice feelings you once ignored. This gentle awareness is the bridge between holding everything in and finally learning to release what no longer belongs within you. As you observe yourself more honestly, you start seeing patterns you didn't notice before. You realize how often you push your emotions aside just to make it through the day. You notice the way your thoughts tighten when you remember something unresolved. You see how quickly you absorb stress that was never yours in the first place. These realizations are not signs of weakness. They are signs that your inner world is waking up. Letting go requires presence more than strength. When you stop running from your feelings, they lose the power they once had over you. You begin to understand that every heavy moment you avoided was only waiting for a safe space to be felt. And now, for the first time in a long time, you are giving yourself that space without fear or judgment. Old memories may rise again, but this time they feel lighter. They show up not to pull you back, but to leave your system. These memories are echoes of who you once were, not who you are becoming. You do not need to force them away. Simply acknowledge them with a soft heart. When you do, they naturally loosen and drift out of your emotional space. Your body also begins to express the changes happening inside your mind. You may feel a subtle release in your shoulders, a slower rhythm in your breathing, or a new sense of steadiness in your chest. These small physical shifts are signs that your emotional weight is softening. Your body remembers every burden you carried, and it also remembers how to relax when the pressure begins to lift. As you move deeper into awareness, you also realize that closure does not come from the past making sense. Closure comes from choosing peace, even when understanding never arrives. You stop waiting for apologies. You stop waiting for explanations. You stop waiting for someone else to free you. Healing begins the moment you decide that your inner peace matters more than the answers you never received. Letting go is a quiet decision you make again and again. It happens each time you breathe through a difficult memory instead of resisting it. It happens each time you speak to yourself with kindness instead of judgment. And it happens each time you choose to release a thought that no longer supports your growth. This part of your journey reminds you that healing is not about rushing forward. It is about allowing your inner world to soften so you can understand yourself with greater clarity. With every moment of awareness, a new layer of heaviness lifts, and you slowly begin to feel the lightness you have been missing. Chapter 2. Understanding Inner Resistance. As you begin releasing the emotional weight you carried for so long, something new starts to appear within you: resistance. It doesn't show up as loud thoughts or clear emotions. It arrives quietly, like a hesitation in your mind or a small tightness in your chest. This resistance is not your enemy. It is simply the part of you that has been trying to protect you for years. When you have held pain for a long time, letting it go feels unfamiliar. Your mind becomes cautious because healing requires you to step into a space you have avoided. This is why, even when you want peace, a part of you still pulls back. Inner resistance forms when old emotions try to leave, but your mind is still learning how to let them go without fear. Sometimes resistance feels like overthinking. You may question your decisions, doubt your healing, or feel unsure about your progress. Other times, resistance shows up as emotional numbness. You know something inside you is shifting, but you can't name exactly what it is. This is normal. Your inner world is adjusting after years of carrying the same patterns. The key to moving through resistance is gentleness. You cannot break it by force. You soften it by patience. When you acknowledge the hesitation within you instead of judging it, the resistance begins to loosen. It wants reassurance, not pressure. It wants safety, not speed. As you sit with your feelings, you begin to notice that resistance appears most strongly when you are close to real change. Your mind senses that you are stepping into a new emotional space, and it tries to protect you from the unknown. But slowly, as you breathe and stay present, you realize the unknown is not dangerous. It is simply unfamiliar. You may feel moments where your emotions rise and fall unpredictably. 1 hour you feel light, and the next you feel restless. This is not a setback. This is your inner world reorganizing itself. Old beliefs are loosening. Old fears are fading. And your heart is learning how to exist without carrying everything at once. When you treat yourself with compassion, resistance becomes softer. Your mind begins to trust your intentions. Your heart begins to trust your pace. Healing does not require you to be fearless. It only requires you to be willing. Willing to feel, willing to understand, willing to release what no longer supports your growth. This part of your journey reminds you that resistance is a sign of progress, not failure. It shows that your inner world is shifting, that old emotional structures are breaking open, and that you are preparing for a calmer, clearer version of yourself. With every moment of patience, resistance loses its strength, and you step deeper into the peace you have been seeking. As you move deeper into your healing, you begin to understand that resistance is not a wall blocking your progress. It is a signal that your inner world is shifting in ways your mind is not used to yet. And like anything unfamiliar, it brings hesitation. This hesitation is natural. It happens because your emotions are adjusting to a gentler way of living. When you start releasing old patterns, the parts of you shaped by pain become aware that change is happening. These parts were created to protect you during difficult times, and now they fear that letting go means losing the safety they once provided. This is why resistance often appears at the very moment you begin to feel lighter. Your mind is learning to move without the weight it carried for years. You may notice resistance show up in small ways. You might feel distracted when you try to reflect on your emotions. You might feel restless when you attempt to sit in silence. Or you might feel a sudden urge to return to old habits just because they feel familiar. This is not failure. It is your inner system trying to understand the new space you are creating. The best way to move through resistance is by staying present, not by fighting your feelings, not by forcing progress, but by gently acknowledging what rises inside you. When you sit with your resistance instead of pushing it away, it loses the intensity it once held. Your mind begins to recognize that you are not abandoning your past. You are simply choosing to live differently. Some days you may feel like you are moving forward. Other days you may feel like nothing is changing. But even on those heavy days, something within you is shifting quietly. Healing often happens beneath the surface, long before you see visible changes in your thoughts or emotions. Trust this unseen movement. Trust that your inner world is learning at its own pace. There will also be moments when you feel emotionally tired. This tiredness is not a sign that you are going backward. It is the natural exhaustion that comes when the heart releases old tension. Letting go requires energy, even when it looks gentle on the outside. Rest is not a break from healing, it is a part of healing. Your mind needs pauses to integrate everything you are learning. As you continue this journey, you begin to see that resistance is actually guiding you toward clarity. It reveals the parts of you that need compassion. It shows you the emotions you avoided. It teaches you patience. And slowly, it helps you understand that true healing does not happen by pushing yourself. It happens by allowing yourself. This chapter ends by reminding you that resistance is not a barrier. It is a transition, a sign that your inner world is rearranging itself so you can step into your next emotional chapter with more steadiness, more awareness, and more space to breathe freely. Chapter 3. Meeting your emotions with honesty. As your resistance begins to soften, something even more important starts to happen. You finally gain the space to meet your emotions without fear. This is where true healing begins. When you are no longer overwhelmed by inner tension, you can listen to what your heart has been trying to say for a long time. Your emotions, once buried under layers of pressure and noise, now rise gently, asking to be understood. Many people spend years avoiding their feelings because they fear that if they ever stop and face them, everything inside will fall apart. But the truth is the opposite. Emotions do not break you. Avoiding them is what creates the quiet cracks inside you. When you meet your emotions with honesty instead of judgment, they become softer, clearer, and easier to understand. Honesty with yourself does not mean forcing yourself to feel everything at once. It means slowing down enough to notice what arises. Sometimes you may sense sadness without knowing why. Sometimes you feel tension that doesn't have a story attached to it. And sometimes you may feel relief without any explanation. All these experiences are normal. They show that your inner world is opening in ways it couldn't before. As you welcome your emotions with a gentler attitude, you begin to realize that feelings are not obstacles. They are messages. Sadness may be showing you something unresolved. Frustration may be revealing where you need boundaries. Fear may be pointing toward a place inside you that has been waiting for reassurance. When you listen without trying to silence these messages, your emotions begin to guide you rather than overwhelm you. The most powerful part of this process is realizing that your feelings are not threats. They are signals that you are human. You do not need to fight them or hide them. You only need to allow them to exist long enough for your mind to understand their purpose. When you do this, the emotional weight you once feared begins to dissolve naturally. You may notice moments of unexpected clarity. A thought that once felt heavy becomes lighter. A memory that once hurt feels distant. A fear that once controlled you becomes quieter. This happens when emotions are finally given the space to move freely instead of staying trapped inside unspoken corners of your heart. Being emotionally honest with yourself also brings comfort to your body. Your breathing becomes steadier, your awareness becomes sharper, and your thoughts move with more ease. Your mind is no longer fighting its own signals. Instead, it is learning to trust them. This part of your journey shows you that honesty is healing. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that grows softly inside you and gives you permission to feel without fear. When you stop running from your emotions, you step into a deeper level of peace that was always waiting beneath the surface. After allowing your emotions to speak more openly in the previous part, you may notice a new kind of quietness forming inside you. It isn't emptiness, it's space. The kind of space that appears only when the heart finally feels safe enough to rest. This space becomes the ground where deeper honesty begins to take shape. As you sit with this new stillness, you start understanding that every emotion carries a message. Some feelings ask you to slow down. Some remind you of boundaries you ignored. Others reveal parts of yourself you outgrew long ago. When you meet these messages without resistance, you begin to uncover truths that were hidden beneath years of noise. You might notice that emotions you once dismissed now feel clearer. A sudden sadness may reveal a need you ignored. A brief irritation might point to something you tolerated for too long. A moment of calm might show you how much pressure you have silently carried. These small insights aren't dramatic, but they reshape how you understand your inner world. The more you honor your emotions, the more your body responds. You may feel the tightness in your chest soften. Your breathing may become more natural. Your thoughts may stop chasing themselves in circles. These shifts show that your inner space is expanding, little by little, with every moment of honesty you allow. Sometimes unexpected emotions rise, feelings you thought you left behind. This is normal. Healing often brings old emotions to the surface, not to overwhelm you, but to release what was stored unspoken. When these moments come, meet them gently. They are not setbacks. They are parts of you asking for closure. With this growing clarity, you also start recognizing which emotions were truly yours and which ones you carried for others. You may realize you absorbed stress that never belonged to you. You may notice you shaped yourself around people's expectations without noticing the cost. These realizations are not painful endings. They are beginnings of emotional freedom. Honesty with yourself also strengthens your inner voice. That quiet voice becomes clearer, steadier, more reliable. It guides you away from old habits and toward choices that support your peace. You begin to understand what you feel, why you feel it, and what your emotions need in order to move naturally through you. This stage of your journey teaches you that emotional honesty is not a single moment of truth. It is a continuous relationship with yourself. The more you show up for your emotions, the more they guide you instead of overpower you. And slowly, you begin to live with a sense of inner balance that once felt out of reach. Chapter 4. The Stories We Tell Ourselves. As you grow more comfortable with your emotions, a new realization begins to surface. Much of your inner weight didn't come from the events themselves, but from the stories you told yourself afterward. This understanding arrives quietly, almost like a soft light revealing what was previously hidden behind old interpretations and assumptions. You start noticing how often your mind adds meaning to moments that were never meant to carry so much emotional weight. A simple silence becomes rejection. A delayed response becomes a sign of distance. A small disagreement becomes a threat to your worth. These stories take shape so quickly that you barely notice you're creating them, yet they influence how you feel long after the moment has passed. When you slow down and look deeper, you begin to see that many of these stories were built during times when you didn't know how to protect your heart. They were shaped by childhood fears, old insecurities, and past experiences that taught you to expect disappointment before safety. Your mind created these stories to make sense of pain, but over time they began to limit your understanding of yourself and the world around you. The healing begins when you start questioning these inner narratives, not with judgment, but with curiosity. You ask yourself, is this feeling based on what is happening now, or on something old that still lives inside me? This simple question creates distance between your emotion and the story attached to it. In that distance, you begin to breathe more freely. You may realize that some of your beliefs were formed in moments when you were hurt and unprepared. You may see that you held on to interpretations that protected you then, but restrict you now. And when this truth becomes clear, the stories lose their power. They stop shaping your reactions so strongly. They stop defining your sense of self. As you untangle these stories, your inner world becomes softer. You begin responding to situations with a clearer mind instead of old assumptions. You listen differently. You observe differently. You understand differently. And slowly you begin to recognize that your life feels heavy, not because of what happened, but because of how long you carried the meaning you attached to it. Your body also senses this shift. The tension that once came from anticipating hurt begins to fade. The uneasiness that came from expecting disappointment becomes lighter. Your breathing becomes steadier as your mind stops replaying old scripts. This physical ease is a sign that your inner stories are losing their grip. This part of your journey reminds you that you are not defined by the conclusions you made during painful times. You have the ability to rewrite your inner narrative. You can choose interpretations that support your peace instead of your fear. And with each story you release, you move closer to understanding yourself with clarity rather than assumption. Once you recognize how much your inner stories shape your emotions, a second realization slowly emerges. Some of these stories are so deeply rooted that you don't even notice when they influence your thoughts. They operate quietly in the background, directing your reactions before you consciously understand what you're feeling. This recognition can feel surprising at first, but it also brings clarity. You begin to see patterns that were invisible before. You notice how quickly your mind fills in blanks with assumptions, how easily you expect certain outcomes because they once happened in the past, and how strongly old fears still try to guide your present choices. These patterns don't appear to harm you. They appear to protect you, but they end up keeping you trapped in emotional cycles that no longer match the person you are becoming. When you start challenging these stories, even gently, they begin to weaken. You ask yourself, what else could this moment mean? What if my first reaction isn't the whole truth? What if my fear is remembering something old, not responding to something new? Each question becomes a small opening through which a more balanced perspective enters. With time, you learn that your emotions are not lying to you, but the meaning you attach to them sometimes is. A moment of fear might simply mean uncertainty, not danger. A moment of sadness might mean release, not loss. A moment of silence might mean peace, not rejection. These shifts in interpretation reduce the weight of your emotional experience and help you respond with more calmness. As the stories lose their strength, your interactions with others also change. You stop assuming hidden intentions. You stop expecting disappointment. You begin listening with clearer ears and observing with a softer heart. Conversations feel lighter. Misunderstandings become less frequent. You create emotional room for understanding instead of reacting from past wounds. Your body also reflects this change. The tension that once appeared instantly no longer rises as quickly. Your breathing stays steadier even when emotions move inside you. The heaviness around your chest begins to lighten. This physical change is proof that your inner stories are no longer controlling your emotional responses the way they once did. As you continue this process, you start seeing yourself differently too. You begin understanding that you weren't broken. You were living under narratives that shaped your view of the world. Now, with clarity growing inside you, you realize you have the power to rewrite these narratives. This part of your journey teaches you that healing is not just about releasing emotions. It is also about rewriting the meaning behind them. When the stories shift, the feelings change. When the feelings change, the way you move through life changes. And slowly, you begin living with a sense of freedom and understanding that once felt impossible. Chapter 5. Understanding Emotional Attachments. After realizing how your inner stories shape your emotions, another truth begins to surface quietly. Many of your feelings come from attachments you formed long before you understood them. These attachments are not only to people. Sometimes they are to memories, routines, or old versions of yourself that once felt safe. This understanding rises slowly, like a soft awareness in the background. You start noticing how certain emotions pull you back to familiar places, even when those places no longer support your well-being. The mind often chooses familiarity over peace, because what is known feels safer than what is new. As you become more honest with yourself, you begin to see which attachments comfort you and which ones quietly confine you. Some were created in moments when you needed protection. Others formed when you needed meaning. But as you grow, the same attachments can also limit your ability to move forward. You might feel heaviness when you imagine letting something go, a bit of fear, a hint of emptiness. These feelings appear not because the attachment is right for you, but because your mind learned to depend on it. Now, as your inner world evolves, these emotional ties slowly rise toward the surface. Understanding attachment is not about forcing sudden release. It is about gently exploring why you held on in the first place. Was it comfort, routine, safety, or simply a familiar identity? When you ask these questions without pressure, the attachment begins to loosen naturally. You may also realize you remained attached to certain memories because they reminded you of who you used to be. Or you stayed connected to old emotions because they were tied to moments that shaped you deeply. These realizations may feel tender, but they help you see yourself with greater honesty. As these attachments reveal themselves, your body begins to respond. The tightness in your chest feels lighter, your breathing deepens, your thoughts stop moving in the same old loops. These subtle shifts show that your inner world is preparing for release, even if you haven't fully let go yet. This stage teaches you that attachments are not failures. They are emotional bonds you created when you needed something to hold on to. You were trying to survive, understand, or stay grounded. But healing gives you the chance to choose new attachments, ones built on clarity rather than fear. By noticing your attachments, you take the first step toward transforming them. Awareness begins the process. Honesty deepens it. And slowly, you start creating room inside yourself for healthier, calmer emotional connections, both with your past and with the life you are trying to build now. As you go deeper into understanding your attachments, you may notice something unexpected. The attachment itself often fades long before you feel ready to let it go. What holds on is not the memory or the person. It is the emotional meaning your mind connected to it. This realization helps you see that letting go is less about releasing an external connection and more about freeing the internal link tied to it. You begin to recognize that some attachments exist because they gave you a sense of stability during uncertain times. Others stayed because they reminded you of moments when you felt valued, understood, or seen. And even when those moments ended, the emotional imprint remained, creating a bond that feels strong even when it no longer supports your growth. This awareness allows you to observe your attachments with more compassion. Instead of asking, "Why am I still holding on?" you begin asking, "What part of me is afraid to move forward?" This shift changes everything. You stop blaming yourself for holding on, and you start understanding the need behind the attachment, a need that may still be waiting to be acknowledged. You may also realize that letting go does not mean erasing the past. It means releasing the emotional weight connected to it. The memories remain, but the heaviness begins to soften. You no longer feel pulled backward when you think of them. Instead, you feel a quiet acceptance rising inside you, an acceptance that allows you to honor your past without being bound by it. As this shift happens, your emotional reactions change too. Situations that once triggered old feelings now pass through you more gently. You feel less fear when uncertainty appears. You feel less pressure when relationships shift. These changes show that your attachment is loosening, even if the final release has not fully arrived. Your body often senses this transformation before your mind does. You may feel your chest expand more easily, or your shoulders relax without effort. You may experience moments of unexpected peace, where your thoughts feel quieter and your emotions feel more organized. These physical signals tell you that your inner world is creating space for something new. With this clarity, you begin to understand that letting go is not a moment, but a process. It unfolds gently, through awareness and honesty. Every time you acknowledge what you feel without clinging to it, you weaken the emotional thread that kept you tied. Every time you breathe through discomfort instead of avoiding it, you strengthen your ability to move forward. This part of your journey teaches you that emotional freedom comes not from forgetting what you loved or feared, but from recognizing that you no longer need to hold those attachments to feel whole. The version of you who created those attachments did so for a reason, but the version of you who is healing is learning to live with more openness, presence, and emotional space. Chapter 6: Learning to Create Emotional Space. After understanding how attachments shape your emotions, you may begin to notice a gentle but important shift inside you, a growing desire for space. Not distance from life, but space within yourself. The kind of space where your thoughts can rest, your emotions can move freely, and your inner world can breathe without feeling crowded. This desire for space is a sign of healing. It shows that your mind is no longer trying to hold everything at once. Instead, it is learning to separate what belongs to you from what you quietly carried for others. This separation isn't harsh, it's soft, like a calm boundary forming inside you, allowing you to feel without being overwhelmed. As you explore this space, you begin noticing how much of your emotional exhaustion came from constantly filling every silence with overthinking, every pause with fear, and every empty moment with old memories. When you allow space within, you realize silence is not your enemy. It is your reset. It gives your mind time to settle and allows your emotions to unfold without pressure. Creating emotional space also means becoming more aware of what drains you and what restores you. You may start noticing how certain situations tighten your chest, while others soften it. You may feel how some conversations calm your thoughts, while others leave you unsettled long after they end. These signals are not random. They are your inner world, guiding you toward balance. With more awareness, you begin giving yourself permission to step back when needed, not to escape, but to regroup. You understand that you don't have to respond immediately, absorb everything, or carry every feeling the moment it appears. This understanding turns emotional space into a gentle form of self-respect. As your space expands, your reactions become clearer. You no longer feel pulled into emotional waves without warning. Instead, you observe your feelings as they rise, and they begin to move through you in a calmer rhythm. This shift doesn't mean you feel less. It means you feel with more clarity, without losing yourself in the experience. Your body responds to this new space too. You may feel more grounded in your breathing, more steady in your steps, and more present in everyday moments. Even simple pauses begin to feel comforting. They remind you that your emotions do not need to rush, and neither do you. This part of your journey shows you that emotional space is not emptiness. It is freedom. It is a place where your mind and heart can exist without pressure, where healing can unfold at its own pace, and where you finally learn that peace is not found by controlling your inner world, but by giving it room to move naturally. As this new sense of inner space grows, you might notice something reassuring. You no longer react to every emotion with the same urgency you once did. Instead of being pulled into feelings the moment they rise, you begin to observe them with a softer, steadier awareness. This shift is quiet, but it marks a deep strengthening within you. With this space, you start seeing how certain emotions come and go without needing your full attention. You notice that some thoughts only needed a moment of acknowledgement, not analysis. You recognize that not every feeling is meant to become a story. Some emotions are simply passing signals, reminders from your inner world that you are alive, sensitive, and evolving. In this openness, you begin to understand the value of emotional pacing. Your mind no longer rushes toward conclusions. Your heart no longer pushes you into reactions you're not ready for. Instead, you allow each feeling to unfold at its own rhythm. This patience gives your inner world room to process emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Sometimes you may feel a wave of emotion rise suddenly, a hint of sadness, an unexpected memory, a quiet sense of longing. But instead of tightening up, you allow the wave to pass through you. This is emotional space in action. You are learning not to hold every feeling, but to let it move naturally without gripping it or resisting it. As your inner space becomes more stable, your boundaries grow clearer. You begin to sense when something is draining you before it becomes heavy. You understand when you need rest without feeling guilty. You know when to step back from an emotional moment, not to avoid it, but to approach it with clarity rather than exhaustion. This awareness builds emotional maturity in ways that pressure never could. Your inner voice also becomes clearer in this space. It no longer competes with the noise of unresolved thoughts. It speaks calmly, guiding you toward decisions that support your well-being. You find yourself choosing peace over urgency, clarity over confusion, and steadiness over emotional chaos. These choices create a foundation inside you that feels stronger than anything you relied on before. Your body mirrors these changes. The tension that once sat quietly in your shoulders begins to release. Your breathing deepens without effort. Even moments of uncertainty feel lighter because you are no longer fighting your emotions. You are simply allowing them to exist without letting them control your entire inner landscape. This part of your journey shows you that emotional space is not something you create once. It is something you maintain gently through awareness and kindness. Every time you let a feeling pass without judgment, you expand this space. Every time you choose calm observation over reaction, you strengthen it. And with each step, you move closer to a version of yourself who feels balanced, grounded, and free on the inside. Chapter 7. Releasing what no longer belongs. As your emotional space becomes more stable, a new kind of clarity begins to rise inside you. It's the quiet realization that some of the feelings, habits, and expectations you've carried no longer fit who you are becoming. This clarity does not arrive loudly. It comes gently, almost like a soft awareness that settles in your chest and asks you to look more honestly at what you're still holding. You start noticing how certain thoughts feel heavier than they used to. You may sense that some memories still take up more space than they deserve, or you may realize that certain patterns drain your energy the moment they appear. These signs are not warnings, they are invitations. Invitations to release what has served its purpose and is now ready to leave. Letting go begins with recognition. When you see something clearly, you stop fighting it. You stop justifying it. You stop forcing yourself to carry it. Instead, you begin asking yourself a simple question: does this still belong to me? And very often, the answer comes quietly but firmly: no, it doesn't. Some things you held on to because they once gave you strength. Some remained because you hoped they would change. But as you grow, you learn that not everything is meant to follow you into your next chapter. Some emotions were meant only for a moment, not a lifetime. Releasing doesn't mean rejecting your past. It means acknowledging that you're no longer the same person who once needed those patterns, thoughts, or attachments. You have learned, grown, stretched, and changed. And because of that, the weight you carried has outlived its purpose. As you allow release to happen, you may feel mixed emotions: relief, sadness, peace, uncertainty. These feelings are natural. They show that your inner world is adjusting to the space you're creating. Letting go is not always light in the beginning, but it becomes light as you move forward. Your body responds to this release too. A gentle looseness appears in places that once held tension. Your breathing feels easier. Even your thoughts begin to slow down in a comforting way. These shifts show that your emotional load is becoming lighter, one small moment at a time. Release also changes the way you interact with the world. You stop taking things so personally. You stop holding on to moments that don't need to stay. You learn to allow experiences to pass through you without turning each one into a lifelong story. This freedom brings a kind of calm that is steady, grounding, and quietly strong. This part of your journey reminds you that letting go is not an act of losing. It is an act of aligning. You release what no longer reflects your direction. You keep what nourishes your growth. And with each release, you step closer to a version of yourself who carries only what strengthens your heart, supports your peace, and makes space for the life you are creating. After admitting that some things no longer belong in your inner space, a different kind of awareness begins to settle inside you. It is the awareness that release is not only about letting go of what feels heavy, it is also about learning how to gently separate yourself from the emotions that return out of old habit. This separation doesn't make you cold or distant. It makes you clear. You start noticing how certain thoughts try to rise again, even after you know they no longer serve you. They come back not because they are still true, but because your mind spent years repeating them. These returning thoughts are echoes, not signals. They appear because your inner world is adjusting, and echoes always fade with time when you no longer respond to them. With this clarity, you begin choosing your energy more carefully. When a memory appears, you check whether it belongs to your present or only to your past. When an emotion rises, you observe whether it reflects your current truth or an old story you are still rewriting. This simple awareness prevents you from carrying emotions that no longer need space inside you. Releasing also teaches you the value of gentle discipline, the discipline to redirect your focus when old patterns try to pull you back. You don't fight the emotion, and you don't push it away. You simply remind yourself that you are not required to hold what is already leaving. This shift transforms the process of letting go from a struggle into a quiet practice. As you continue this practice, you may experience moments of emptiness. This emptiness is not a loss. It is room. Room for clarity. Room for new insight. Room for emotional balance. You are not missing anything. You are finally making space for what fits the person you are becoming. Your body feels this too. You notice a lightness in your breathing that wasn't there before. Your thoughts move more steadily without the weight of old tension. Even your posture changes slightly, as if your body is slowly releasing what it held for years without noticing. This clarity also influences the way you move through daily life. You stop holding on to words that were never meant to stay with you. You stop replaying situations that ended long ago. You stop attaching meaning to moments that were simply temporary. This emotional maturity creates a stability inside you that feels both new and familiar. New because you have not lived this way before. Familiar because it aligns with who you were always meant to become. This part of your journey reminds you that release is not about forgetting or ignoring. It is about trusting that your heart knows when something has completed its role. It is about accepting that peace sometimes comes from allowing things to end. And it is about understanding that letting go creates the space your soul needs to grow into its next chapter with honesty, steadiness, and calm. Chapter 8. Healing through acceptance. After releasing what no longer belongs, another shift begins to unfold within you. A shift that feels softer than the others. It's the quiet understanding that healing is not only about removing weight, it is also about accepting the parts of yourself that remained beneath the weight. This acceptance doesn't arrive with celebration. It arrives with calm recognition. You begin noticing that some emotions are not meant to be solved or erased. They are simply meant to be accepted as part of your journey. Not every feeling needs an explanation. Not every memory requires closure. Some experiences only need acknowledgement, a simple, "Yes, this happened," to finally lose their grip on you. Acceptance is not resignation. It is clarity. It is the moment when you stop trying to change what has already passed and start focusing on how you carry it today. When you accept your emotions without fear, they soften. When you accept your past without resistance, it stops standing in your way. Acceptance gives your heart permission to rest. At this point in your journey, you may notice how gently things begin to shift. Thoughts that once felt sharp become quieter. Feelings that once overwhelmed you begin to move through you with less force. You understand that healing doesn't always come from effort. Sometimes it comes from allowing yourself to stop fighting. Acceptance also teaches you to meet yourself with honesty, not the harsh kind, but the kind that embraces your imperfections with compassion. You learn to say, "I did my best with what I knew then, and I am doing my best with who I am now." These truths release the pressure you put on yourself to be perfect or to heal instantly. As you practice acceptance, you begin seeing yourself through a more balanced lens. You understand that you are not the mistakes you made. You are not the moments you wish had gone differently. You are not the emotions that once felt out of control. You are a collection of experiences that shaped your strength, your empathy, and your depth. This acceptance brings calmness to your body as well. Your shoulders loosen. Your breath deepens. The tiredness that once came from resisting your emotions slowly fades. Your body feels safer because your mind is no longer fighting an internal battle it was never meant to fight alone. Most importantly, acceptance creates trust. Trust in yourself, trust in your inner wisdom, and trust in the process of healing. You no longer rush your emotions. You no longer force clarity. You allow your inner shifts to unfold naturally, knowing that each step carries you closer to peace. This part of your journey reminds you that healing is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming yourself without the burden of resistance. Acceptance is the doorway through which emotional freedom enters, and once you step through it, everything inside you begins to align with softness, honesty, and quiet strength. As you move deeper into acceptance, a calm sense of balance begins forming inside you. It feels different from release or emotional space. It feels like steady ground returning beneath you, the kind that grows quietly when you stop fighting your own feelings. You begin to realize that acceptance gives you something you may have needed for years: emotional permission. Permission to feel without judgment. Permission to rest without guilt. Permission to heal at a pace that respects your inner world instead of rushing it. This alone softens the pressure you used to place on yourself. With this softness, you start seeing your past with clearer understanding. You no longer revisit old memories to criticize yourself. You revisit them to learn. You begin to understand why you reacted the way you did, why certain emotions stayed longer than they should, and why some moments shaped you so deeply. As this clarity grows, the heaviness tied to the past begins to loosen. Acceptance also changes the way you handle difficult emotions. When a feeling rises suddenly, you don't panic or question yourself. Instead, you recognize it as a visitor carrying a message. You allow it to pass through rather than hold it in. This simple shift brings steadiness to your inner world. Your self-talk begins to change as well. You stop meeting yourself with harsh expectations. Instead of saying, "Why am I still feeling this?" you say, "It's okay. I'm healing." This kindness becomes one of the strongest forms of emotional strength you develop. Your body responds immediately to this acceptance. Your shoulders don't tense as quickly. Your breathing deepens naturally. Your thoughts feel less crowded. Even moments of silence begin to comfort you rather than make you uneasy. These shifts show that healing is no longer just an idea. It is happening inside you. Acceptance does not erase pain, but it removes the old pressure you once carried with it. You no longer drag past experiences into the present. You no longer measure yourself through old mistakes. You begin to trust that you can handle new emotions without being overwhelmed by old ones. With this trust growing inside you, your choices change as well. You choose conversations that support you. You choose boundaries that protect you. You choose rest when you need it. These small decisions show that acceptance is shaping a stronger, calmer version of you. This part of your journey reminds you that acceptance is not the end. It is the foundation of deeper healing. When you stop resisting your emotions, you create the inner conditions that allow you to grow with honesty, expand with clarity, and move forward with a heart that feels lighter and more aligned with who you truly are. Chapter 9. Redefining your inner strength. After learning to accept yourself with more honesty, something subtle begins to shift inside you. It's as if a quiet strength you never noticed before starts rising from within. This strength doesn't feel loud or forceful. It feels stable, gentle, and deeply rooted. The kind of strength that comes from knowing yourself rather than proving yourself. You begin to understand that your strength was never measured by how much you could carry or how long you could endure. True strength comes from your ability to stay connected to yourself, even when emotions rise or old patterns return. It comes from choosing clarity instead of fear, presence instead of avoidance, and truth instead of old assumptions. As this inner strength grows, you notice how differently you react to the world around you. Situations that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. Words that once triggered you feel less personal. Moments of uncertainty no longer lead you into spirals of fear. This shift isn't accidental. It's the result of all the inner work you've been doing quietly, piece by piece. Strength also begins to show itself in the way you hold boundaries. You understand what drains you and what supports you. You no longer feel guilty for stepping back when you need space. You no longer feel pressured to explain every emotion. Instead, you move with a sense of self-trust that tells you your feelings are valid, your needs matter, and your peace is worth protecting. You may notice that you no longer chase validation the way you once did. You don't need constant reassurance to feel steady. You don't need approval to feel worthy. This shift is one of the clearest signs of inner strength. The ability to recognize your own value without depending on outside voices to confirm it. Your body mirrors this strength as well. Your breathing becomes firmer yet calm. Your posture feels more grounded. Even in quiet moments, you sense a stability that wasn't there before. It is not the strength of tension, it is the strength of alignment, the feeling that your inner world is finally moving in the same direction as your intentions. Strength also appears in your decisions. You make choices with more patience and less fear. You no longer react instantly to emotional discomfort. Instead, you pause, reflect, and respond from a place of inner balance. This shift gives you control not by force, but by awareness. This part of your journey teaches you that strength is not something you achieve suddenly. It grows slowly through understanding, acceptance, and the willingness to face your inner world with clarity. And now, as this calm strength rises within you, you begin to see that you are shaping a version of yourself who can move through life with more confidence, depth, and emotional steadiness than ever before. Sometimes strength reveals itself in the smallest shifts, not in big decisions, but in the way you carry yourself through quiet moments. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that something inside you has already started changing. Not because you forced it, but because you've slowly outgrown the version of yourself who once needed constant protection. This change becomes clearer when you face situations that once drained you. Where you once felt overwhelmed, now you feel more centered. Where you once reacted instantly, now you pause with awareness. These subtle shifts are not accidents. They are the signs of a strength built from understanding, not resistance. You may begin noticing that your emotional responses no longer control your entire day. A difficult moment might still touch you, but it doesn't uproot your balance the way it used to. You feel the emotion, understand it, and allow it to move without letting it define your direction. This quiet control is one of the purest forms of strength. As you deepen into this understanding, you also start to see how strength is woven into your presence. You no longer hide your feelings to appear strong. You no longer pretend to be unaffected. Instead, your strength shows in your honesty, the kind of honesty that says, "I can feel this and still remain grounded." You also begin setting boundaries with more clarity, not to push people away, but to stay true to your emotional capacity. You learn that protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary. And as these boundaries strengthen, so does your sense of self. You start identifying what aligns with your growth and what pulls you away from it. Your body reflects this internal shift too. There's a firmness in your breathing, a steadiness in your posture, a quiet confidence in the way you carry yourself. Even when emotions move through you, they no longer shake your foundation. This physical groundedness is a sign that your internal strength has begun settling into your daily life. Another part of strength appears when you allow yourself to slow down, when you no longer feel the need to rush decisions, when you trust that taking a moment to think, breathe, or simply be still is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of emotional maturity. Slowness becomes a tool rather than a fear. This chapter reminds you that inner strength is not loud. It doesn't force, push, or demand. It grows in silence, through understanding, clarity, and gentle consistency. And as you embrace this deeper form of strength, you realize something important. You are no longer surviving your emotions. You are guiding them. You are meeting life from a place of steadiness that once seemed out of reach. Chapter 10. Making Peace with Imperfection. There are moments in healing when the progress you've made becomes clearer, not because everything feels perfect, but because you finally stop expecting perfection from yourself. And strangely, this realization often appears during ordinary moments: a small mistake, an emotional slip, or a day where you don't feel as strong as yesterday. These moments don't pull you back. They reveal how far you've come. You begin to notice that the pressure to always be okay no longer sits as heavily on your shoulders. You understand that being human means having days of clarity and days of confusion, moments of strength and moments of vulnerability. Instead of judging yourself, you begin offering the kind of compassion you once reserved only for others. Imperfection becomes easier to accept when you realize it has always been part of being alive. You start recognizing the unrealistic standards you carried quietly: the need to be emotionally strong at all times, the expectation to never repeat mistakes, the hope to always have the right words. These pressures didn't protect you, they exhausted you. As you soften these expectations, your emotional world becomes more flexible. When an old pattern resurfaces, you don't fall into self-blame. You simply acknowledge it and adjust. When a wave of sadness appears, you meet it with patience instead of resistance. When you make a choice that doesn't align perfectly with your growth, you see it as part of learning rather than evidence that you are failing. This acceptance deepens your relationship with yourself. You no longer look at your imperfections as flaws that need to be fixed. You see them as reminders that you are evolving. Healing was never about becoming flawless. It was about becoming real. And the more real you become with yourself, the easier it is to move through life without the constant fear of not being enough. Your body also responds to this shift. The tension tied to self-criticism begins to fade. Your breathing feels looser, natural. Even your thoughts become more forgiving. You stop replaying every conversation, every decision, every emotion. Instead, you allow life to unfold without micromanaging every feeling that rises. You begin to understand that imperfection doesn't weaken your journey. It completes it. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you perspective. And it teaches you to grow without the burden of unrealistic standards. This subtle acceptance becomes one of the strongest forms of emotional peace you've cultivated so far. This chapter reminds you that healing isn't about reaching a perfect emotional state. It's about learning to live with openness, patience, and human honesty. When you stop demanding perfection from yourself, you finally give your heart the freedom to grow in ways that feel natural, grounded, and deeply genuine. There comes a moment in healing when you look at yourself and realize something quietly powerful. You didn't reach this point by being perfect. You reached it by continuing, even on the days when everything inside you felt heavy or unclear. Your growth didn't happen in a single breakthrough. It happened in small moments where you chose patience instead of pressure, softness instead of self-criticism, and honesty instead of avoidance. You begin to understand that imperfection is not a flaw in your journey. It is the shape of your humanity. The emotions you once fought now make sense. The mistakes you once feared now feel like lessons. The parts of yourself you used to hide now seem less threatening. You recognize that every uncomfortable moment you lived through quietly shaped your strength from the inside out. As you reflect on your path, you realize how much weight you carried simply because you believed you had to. You feared that letting go would break you, yet letting go became the very thing that set you free. You released expectations that were never yours. You released stories that belonged to older versions of you. And with each release, your heart found a little more space to breathe. You notice the difference in your body too. Your breathing isn't as tight as it once was. Your thoughts don't pull you into the same exhausting loops. Your emotions rise, but they don't drown you. You react less out of fear and more from awareness. These changes don't happen loudly. They settle in quietly, the way healing always does. You also begin to accept that you won't always respond perfectly, and that this is completely okay. Some days you will feel strong, and some days you won't. Some days you will understand your emotions, and some days they will feel confusing again. But now, none of this scares you the way it once did. You know how to pause. You know how to breathe. You know how to find yourself again. This is what maturity feels like. Staying connected to yourself, even when your emotions shift. Allowing yourself to be human without demanding perfection. Meeting yourself with compassion instead of judgment. And trusting that even when you stumble, you are still moving forward in ways that matter. As this final part closes, take this truth with you. Healing is not about becoming flawless. It's about learning to live gently with yourself. You no longer have to fight your heart. You no longer have to carry old versions of yourself. You no longer have to fear being imperfect. You've grown into someone who understands their emotions, respects their boundaries, and chooses peace over pressure. And that alone is proof that your journey has brought you somewhere meaningful. This is the end of the audiobook, but not the end of your healing. Your real journey continues from here, quieter, lighter, steadier, and truer to who you were always meant to be.